All right, our next question, we're going to be going over to TT. She has asked me to read a question from her son, Tio. Now, this one is going to be about fear. It says, it feels like fear is a living entity which can think for itself and is intelligent, something that just wants to scare me and sabotage me. I think it's a little scary to view it this way, but at the same time, it helps me to view it like this since it makes it easier for me to not listen to it and to see its patterns. Is this a correct way to view fear, and what is fear?
Okay. Well, correct way is not the right question. Is it a useful way? Is a better question. There is no correct way to look at it. It's any way that helps you deal with it. That's the correct way for you to deal with that fear. And various fears may take various approaches. Okay. So fear is a very fundamental thing. We talk about, we are consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness is evolving, and that's evolving toward low entropy, away from high entropy. High entropy is fear. Low entropy is toward love. So how more basic can you get to that? It's part of the fundamental fabric of consciousness. It's part of who and what we are. It's very, it's very fundamental. It's not just an overlay. So what is fear? Fear is a part of us that is looking for, that is afraid. I shouldn't say looking for, but is afraid of failure. It's afraid of not being good enough. It's afraid of being useful. It's useless. It's afraid of not being lovable, of not being adequate. So it's afraid of things. That's fear. It's a part of you that's afraid. And when you're afraid, that limits you. If you're afraid that people won't like you, then you don't go out and interact with people, you stay home. Well, that limits you. So fear brings our limitations. It lowers the number of things that we can be and become, limits us. Getting rid of that fear takes those limitations away. Now we can be more, see more, understand more, connect more. And we're no longer worried about whether we're lovable or not. We're just okay with being ourselves. We're not judging ourselves. Am I lovable? That's a judgment. You start judging yourself, you're walking on thin ice. You're very likely to find that the ice breaks and you fall through the hole, because that's the way we are with ourselves. So you don't judge yourself. You just, I am. And I will interact with others. I will do this, do that. And people will like me or not like me, love me or not love me, but I'll be who I am. And if you are who you are and let go of fear, guaranteed 100% people will like you. And the more fear you get rid of, the more likable you become. So it's that kind of a thing. There's not just one process, but yeah, I too have that feeling. When I was growing up, that fear was almost an adversary, something that seemed to have intelligence, because I'd work on getting rid of a fear. And it's like that fear knew me very well. And just as I thought it had it beaten, it'd sneak back through a back door. Something I hadn't really thought about. It'd come around through that back door and it leaps out, screaming and claws out and like, gotcha. And I thought, I got rid of you. Where'd you come from? Oh yeah, there's this other part of me that's kind of afraid here about something. It came in through that door. So yes, I had that same feeling. It was like dealing with a negative, kind of a negative version of me that was trying very hard to win, to beat me, so that fear would dominate. Fear would dominate me and rule me. And I was the positive, low entropy part saying, no, I won't be dominated and ruled by fear. You go away, crawl back in your hole. I'm not going to act that way. I'm not going to be that way. So I just push myself not to act that way or be that way. If I was afraid of going out or standing up in front of people and talking, well, I'd go find a need to stand up in front of people and talk. I'd volunteer for something. And I'd do it. Yeah, it was scary, of course, but you do it and you succeed at it, even if you succeed only barely. You forgot half your lines, part of the way through. All right, you flubbed it, but you did it and it was okay. And, you got an applause anyway because most of the audience felt for you because they saw that you were scared to death and gave you an applause, even if all you did was stand there and smile because they were trying to be helpful. So then you find out that people aren't so bad and it's really not so scary. And it's easier next time and then easier the next time. But you have to have courage to just go do it anyway and see what happens. Now, that doesn't mean I'm afraid of the water because I can't swim, so I'm just going to jump in deep water anyway. No, that wouldn't be too smart. You have to be smart enough to not put yourself in spaces that you're not ready for, but push yourself to take the next step. What's the next step? What can I do? Or at least can I do halfway? Go do that halfway thing and then come back and then do it again and then do it again and do it again. And next time do it 3/4 of the way and do that again and again and again. And the next time do it the whole way. You see? So you just have to constantly work at it and push yourself to take the next step, be that person, have the courage to push yourself into uncomfortable waters where you don't feel so serene and confident. Make yourself go do it. Not all of it, just a piece of it, just a piece until you get comfortable with that piece. Then make yourself do a little bigger piece and so on. But yes, this fear thing, when you finally get this fear cornered and you are making progress and it is slip sliding away, you can guarantee this fear is going to wait for a weak moment and going to come at you, with all fours, screaming and hollering and biting, and it's just going to come after you in any way that it can get you because now it just needs to make you fail just once and you'll slip slide right back to where you were. So yes, it comes out like somebody's thrown a cat at you. It's but if you stand up to that and say, no way, not budging, not going backwards, you'll find that that's kind of the last big hurrah. It'll come at you with everything it has. It'll puff up as big as it can get. And if you stand up to it, then you've won. After that, it shrinks. The next day, it shrinks a little more. And pretty soon, it's gone. And you just don't see it again. But before it's gone, before it slips away, it will try to frighten you, scare you, set you back, make you run back to where you were with your tail between your legs in any way it can try to figure out to make you do that. It will make up all kinds of things, try to convince you of all sorts of things. That's what fear does. And you're right, it's like an adversary. And you have to not let that adversary make you back up from the gains that you've made. Hold your ground, takes courage, and you'll find out that it always works out that you win. Always. In the end, as long as you stay strong, you'll always win because the fear isn't anything more than smoke and mirrors. It's your beliefs. It's the things you believe, old beliefs mostly. It's the things you believe about yourself that you fear about yourself. And when it finally has done its last, biggest, baddest trick to get you to regress, it'll shrink and go away. And then it's gone. You won't have to deal with it anymore. That fear's gone. Then you can spend the next 6 months just luxuriating and being, not around that fear anymore. This is not part of you. And then the next one will creep up and at the next level where you have to work, because these fears are at levels. You clear one level and then you got to clear the next. It's sort of like a video game where you got to go in and clear all the monsters out of the first part of the cave before you clear the bigger monsters out of the last part of the cave. So that's the way it's like, T.O. It is like an adversary. It is like somebody you have to not let win. And it takes resolution, it takes courage, and it takes a long time. You have to do this piece at a time. Don't grab hold of your biggest fear. Do that first. Grab hold of one that's a little smaller and do that one first. And then your confidence with the process working. But you're right. The more you push that fear, the more it pushes back. And the more you make it small, it tries to come back twice that size. You just have to keep pushing until it gives up and leaves you alone. And it will. It always does if you are resolute. So hopefully that will help you, T.O.
Tom, I've been thinking about this fear question for a little while. And I kind of came up with this metaphor using your information metaphors, right? We talk about low entropy. That's a high loving being, right? The information is extremely organized, it's extremely integrated. You're almost very close to the intentions of the larger consciousness system itself, right? That's what we would call a very low entropy being. And we say a high entropy being is one that has a lot of fear. And so I would think the kind of logical conclusion to that is fear is this fundamental part of you that's holding you back from integrating your information to be helpful, to be more organized. And it's, like you said, it's always irrational, right? All our fears are completely irrational. But it's like when you're a really low entropy being, you fit just like a computer chip does into a motherboard. You fit and you're working great and everything's flowing great through you. And when you're high entropy, this fear is just, it says, no, we don't want you to fit into the board. We don't want you to fit into the system, right? Could you see what kind of idea I was coming up with?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's just another way of looking at it. Look at it in ways that help you deal with it. That's what I first started out telling Tia. There's not a right way to look at it. Everybody can have their own perspective on fear and how to deal with it in their own way. And Tio he was experiencing the way that it's like a nemesis. It's like your nemesis that hides in the closet, and it just, the more you beat it up, it comes back and it's just as tough as ever. Well, you have to be tougher, and you have to always take the next step with courage. So it takes courage to do it. So that was for Tio. But if you see it in a little different sense, then you'll probably react to it in a little different sense, and that'll be better for you and the way you see it. You see it like it's always dysfunctional, and you fight fear by keeping your life as functional as possible. That's that's kind of another methodology, another way of looking at it, and for you that'll probably work better. So different people have to deal with it in different ways. For it's very visceral. It's like this thing that lives inside of him. There's like this negative alter ego that lives inside of him that tells him he's not worth much. He can't do it. If he went out in the park and sat down by himself to play an instrument, instead of people just standing around listening and having, enjoying his music, he would imagine that people would laugh at him or something like that, because that's this fear, that he has. So from that viewpoint, it's organic to you, and you need to just overcome it step by step. So I've done it both ways. I've done it probably a dozen different ways, but I can relate with Tio because I've also done it that way.
All right, thank you, Tom. Matthew, you're next.
Hey Tom, how are you?
Good, Matthew.
Good to see you. I was just curious about how we evaluate our working relationship with the LCS. A little background is that like I will feel connected for maybe a day or two or three, and then not for like several weeks. And I've just been feeling very foggy like the last month. And I noticed the only time I feel really connected with the LCS is if I'm having a crisis. So I don't want to have to keep having those in order to feel, a part of things.
Well, probably you should, in those periods where you don't feel connected to the LS, meditate. You can reopen that connection just with the meditation. So I'd say in those times when you don't feel connected, sit down and meditate and get that connection, feel that warmth, feel that love. Get in that position. You can just sit there and feel good, feel strong. Just feel it, feel the warmth. If you have to put that in terms of symbols, you may feel like you're sitting in a in a lovely park with a big ray of sunshine coming down, out of the clouds. It may be raining all around you, but there's this big light coming down and you feel warm and dry and secure. And maybe that's the way you'd make it in your mind. But you can do that anytime, and that will reconnect you for a while. And then you get back into life. Life has a way of pulling that plug out, because life is often harsh and not particularly nice and caring. So you deal with that for a while, and then you kind of need to be recharged. Well, that's why people that meditate tend to meditate like every day, because every day they run into stuff that drags them down. So use your meditation as a recharging station. Get up a good tool, like you sitting in the center of this beautiful space and a ray of light coming down to warm you or something. That's just a tool. It's a way for you to put kind of all the goodness and warmth and love that is the LCS. You put it into some kind of a pattern or form or idea or picture, and then just focus on that. So that's just making a tool. Find the tools that work for you and then use them often.
But I did want to ask, like, generally, how do we have a sense of like how we're doing with our working relationship with the LCS?
Don't worry about it. When you start asking, how am I doing? You're looking for a judgment. You're judging yourself. Am I doing it well? Let that go. It doesn't matter. You just be who you are and don't worry too much about how you're doing. Just do it in the way that you feel like it's good. That's good enough. Now, if you want to look in on it once a year and ask, how am I doing? Well, that's not such a bad idea, but to ask it every day or every other day, that's insecurity. Just do it. Be secure, feel the love, connect, live your life, try to do things the right way, try not to judge yourself or others, and live. And there's no need to do tests. If you want to do tests, the one test you can do is, do I have any negative thoughts or negative feelings? If I do, imagine the last 4 or 5 days. Have I had any negative thoughts or negative feelings? And if you do, then, well, there's more work to do. If you don't, you're doing fine. So that's about the only test you need. How negative is your life in general? And that doesn't mean that, when you're going to run into negative people. You're going to run into nasty people. You're going to run into people who will make themselves feel better by hurting you. People like that are out in the world. But you can't let that get you down. That's just people. It's the way they are. They're they're low quality consciousness, and they just act that way. So you let them be, and you kind of brush that aside as meaningless, and you go on with your life.
That's very helpful. Thanks so much.
All right, our next question, we're moving along to Simon. Why don't you go ahead, Simon?
Yes, thank you. Okay, with my out of body experience, I have big vibration with my chest, and what is it? Is it more like a whole song of the waiting for for phoning song, you know? Or what is it with the vibration?
Okay.
Yes.
I think that, and I'm not entirely positive about this, but my best guess as to what that vibration is, because I've actually seen that vibration on instruments. When somebody are in that vibration state, you can actually look at a galvanic skin response needle just sitting there and shaking. So it actually has physical manifestations to it sometimes. Now, I don't know that it does all the time, but if you had sensitive enough measurements, it probably does all of the time. So I think what's going on are several things. One is that when you get to the point where you get that vibration state, that's the point where you drop the data stream that defines this virtual reality that we call the physical universe. That's when you stop being in the physical universe. Okay, so you're lying there and you're in a meditation state, you're letting everything go. And when you just do let go and you no longer feel the chair underneath of you or the bed underneath of you, you're not really aware of the physical reality anymore. You've let that data stream go. I think what happens is that all of these servo systems in your body is a whole system of balances, and it depends on input. You get input data all the time, and the input data keeps you balanced and going. When you suddenly drop that data stream, the input disappears. Your body's not, your I shouldn't say your body, but your avatar no longer is getting any input. So what happens is all those servo systems start searching. They start wobbling. I don't know if you've ever seen a tracking radar is a servo system. And if it loses a target, it just sits there and wobbles looking for that target, but it's not there. So it just sits there and it wobbles, in a circle looking for it. So I think that's part of what you feel and what I measure with equipment about your pulsation state. Your whole body gets into kind of a resonance of about 4 hertz because you don't have any more data coming into your system. So it's a good signpost that you've gotten to the point where you've dropped physical reality. All right. If you've dropped physical reality, then, like Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're someplace else. So then it's just a matter of having your intent say, where do you want to be? Where would you like to go? What do you want to do? You've already kind of dropped this reality. Now you just have to have an intention for what you want to do next. Well, so that's one viewpoint. Also, the larger consciousness system uses that vibration as a fear test. So it's important for people getting into the out of body that they not be fearful. Because if you're fearful, you'll find scary stuff there. And it'll just, you'll get into the cycle of out of body is about fighting. It's not about fighting. It's about growing up and learning to become love and stop fighting. So the system will make those vibrations feel really large and really severe, like you're just like a flag in 100-mile-an-hour hurricane just flapping and going crazy, and enough that it scares you and then you quit. Well, then you're not ready yet. What you need to do is think of those vibrations when they start to get a little unruly. Think of them as like, okay, you're on what the cowboys in the West would call a bucking bronco. You're on something that's trying to throw you off. But the way you win the game is to hang on and let that bucking bronco just go to it until it tires itself out. And you just need to hang in there until it does tire itself out. So that would then be the right attitude. All right, vibrations, if you're going to go crazy on me and get, I'm hanging on your back. I'm not going to let go. I'm just going to hang with it. And you're going to, even if even if you shred me, I'll be shredded. I'm just going to hang with it, whatever happens. And when you do that, sure enough, they start to settle down. Oh, they'll get violent for a while just to see if you really mean it or whether you're just making it up. But when it comes out that you really mean it, then they'll start to slow down and they'll get pretty peaceable. And after that, they won't bother you so much. Or they may test you another time or two to see if that was good luck or whether you actually can ride them to where they quit. And then you don't see them in a negative way. After that, it's always just a very nice little comfy feeling of, just humming with a nice vibration. It's a good signpost that says, oh, you just let go of the physical data stream. Now what? So then you look forward to it. Oh, am I vibrating yet? Yeah, not quite. I need to relax a little more. It goes from a negative thing. Oh no, there's a vibration state. Uh-oh, to a positive thing where it's a sign that you're doing well. You've just let go of the reality. Now, what do you want to do? So that's my story on that vibration state, but it's very common. Almost everybody experiences it. Eventually, you'll experience it only as a very, very slight tremor that you'll experience. Again, a signpost for you. And sometimes you won't experience it at all. You just miss it altogether. It's not important anymore.
Okay, thank you. That's really a phenomenally of the log in and log out process of other realities. What I learn. And thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Tom, I'm going to read a question from Polina. She's here today. The question has to do with you giving some examples of when people may want to hold on to their beliefs and resist healing. When she goes into the healing sessions, she usually just has the intent to heal, but sometimes she finds herself talking to the person, sending them an idea that they don't need to hold on to this cause of illness and course of illness anymore. They don't need protection of that idea or fear anymore. So if you can say something about these situations, about fear and beliefs, trying to hold on to mistakenly keeping safe from other problems coming up next when fear and beliefs and this sickness are gone.
Okay. When people are ill, it's typically true that they've created that illness. Now, by saying that, I don't mean they just, suddenly given themselves, the measles or something, but they create a situation in which the illness can take root. And it has to do with fear. It has to often do with people who do not have a positive picture of themselves. They have some negative pictures, picture of themselves. They feel negative about themselves. They feel inadequate. They're not doing it right. They're not what they should be. They should have paid attention more in school, whatever. They find these faults and they will make up strategies of how to deal with these fears. And one of those strategies might be getting ill. Well, if I was ill, I wouldn't have to go out and fight that dragon. If I was ill, people would come around and help me and be kind to me and be nice and that sort of thing. And I wouldn't be expected to go out and fight that dragon. So now getting ill is a way to avoid fighting that dragon that you need to fight in order to, get yourself to the next level. So in that case, yes, the idea of, and I guess I should say people get into that habitually. It becomes a habit. It's not that they're just suddenly got an illness, but they have this kind of disability, maybe for years in their life. This illness kind of grows in little bits and pieces, and 20, 30 years later, maybe it's worse, but they still have it. It's not like suddenly you get a disease. It's just it may be a disability, maybe a disease. It may be, too much stomach acid. It may show itself in a lot of little nagging ways that it just is a little not quite right the way it should be, but it draws it draws attention to that problem so that people don't see the real problem underneath. So the illness is kind of a thing that some people even hide behind, and they carry it along for many years, and they don't realize that. They don't realize that at all those years, most of that ill health that they had to do with them believing negative things about themselves. And that is what really was at the root of this problem, for 20 years or something. So when you're healing people like that, yes, sometimes the right thing to do is just to encourage them, you can just let this go. You don't have to keep on this path, because medically, most of these people are in a category where they have a problem, but the doctors don't really know what to do about it. They go to doctors, they go to lots of doctors, and the doctors look at them and don't really know what to do with it. Give them a prescription here and there, but nobody says, oh, take this and that'll fix it. Nothing really quite fixes it. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse. It's just a malaise that kind of goes with them through life. That's often a malaise of their own making and own creation. It's not that they just have inadequate stomach bacteria for digesting food, and all of that's a good excuse for it. But typically, when there really is a physical problem, the docs will find the physical problem. When there really isn't one, then almost always it's a created problem. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a physical problem. I'm not saying the physical problem is all in somebody's head. No, it's in their body. It hurts. It's painful. They don't digest their food well. Things don't work. Their shoulder's frozen. They have no motion in that shoulder. There are real physical things going on there. It's just that those physical things come from an emotional, mental, fear-based cause, and they get turned into physical attributes within the avatar's body. So that's a case where the consciousness leads and the body follows. The consciousness has these issues. The way the body expresses those issues is in terms of pain or dysfunction in some way. So, yes, helping people let go of old habits that are dysfunctional, even if those habits aren't really habits of doing, they're habits of thinking, can be very valuable. Can be a very valuable process to do that. But when you go to heal somebody, you really need to look at them and see what's basically wrong here. And you'll get a sense. Is it emotional? Is it fear-based? Is it, just they happen to get a bacteria or a virus or a fungus or something, and their body just has to deal with it? What's really going on here? How much of this illness is from a consciousness dysfunction component, and how much is just the physical body, bad luck? And when you come to that, when you kind of get a sense of what's really causing this and where does it come from, it will help you not only make the diagnosis, but know what to do to help these people best. Because then you treat that differently than the way you treat somebody who just, went to the grocery store, got hold of a basket that just had a 2-year-old with a runny nose in it. And guess what? You get whatever that 2-year-old has. You got the flu or you got something else and you're sick. And it's nothing that you created. It's just bad luck, because that happens too. Sometimes it's just bad luck. But that kind of random stuff, though it happens to all of us, those are the easiest things to cure. The random things are the easiest. The ones that are embedded within the consciousness are chronic, and they're the hardest things to cure. And helping people just let go of it. It's like, I don't need this anymore. I don't need this being ill to give me an excuse of why I can't perform, or why I'm not good enough. Well, it's not me. I'm really good enough, but I just got this illness, so that's why I can't perform very well. So it gets you out of having to show whether you're good enough or not. Fear. So eventually a healer who does a lot of healing automatically does that kind of assessment of what's going on and kind of knows how to best approach the problem. But it takes time. That's another thing, like the remote viewing. If when you've been doing it for 20 years, you're better at it than you've only been doing it for 10 years.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move along to Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl, how you doing? It's your turn to ask.
I'm doing great. Hello, everyone. Hello, Tom. Good to see you. I was just listening to the early part of the talk, and it was about relationships and working with others. And I said, oh, that's probably a good place to go in. The relationships, I didn't like any of them. They were so hard, and I had so much fear that it just was a horrible mess every time I tried to, build on those and work through them. So I've been working quite a bit on relationships, and I thought maybe I would just share this and maybe Tom can expand on it some. As I started working on the relationships, I started with the inner ones, family and pieces, and then it started spreading out. I started getting better at, other relationships around me. And yeah, I started getting the dragons and the different levels of the monsters. And I wanted to share, finally, I got better, and it took, just you get the experience, and then you can just work on it. And then each time you get a little bit better at it. And one thing I finally got my foot in the door with is not blaming other people when I would get upset or frustrated with what they're doing. Because as I had more and more relationships, people do all kinds of crazy things, and you don't know why or what's going on. And, but the thing about it was funny, because the situation, it would be the exact thing that would happen is something I needed to learn or go deeper in with myself, and discovering, where my stuff is and where my fears are, and for the other person too at the same time. So I was getting better at pulling out my piece of it and looking at it and going, wait a minute, this is mine. And I got better at looking at the person, dripping, fear and bleeding from my eyes, and just going, excuse me, I'm trigger happy. I'm going to leave and I'm going to circle back, and I'll come back in and talk to you in a minute, because I don't even know what's going on right now. Let me just excuse myself, because I don't think I want to hear what I'm going to say, and neither do you. So, and then I started getting better and better at it, and then like using jokes. It's like, oh, I've stumped my toe. I'm so sorry. But in the beginning of doing this fear work in these relationships, it's really difficult, and then it really comes at you. And then if you keep just pushing through it, and it's like, okay, what's the worst thing can happen? Okay, somebody's going to get mad at you. Oh, well, everybody gets mad at you anyway, because you can't do relationships. and just keep pushing through it, because you get to those different layers. Then what I noticed happening is that I could have better relationships. The inner circle relationships that I started working on first got even better. And the relationships that I was, the more and more relationships coming in, I was getting better at those too. But there was a lot of disasters in it, though. There was a lot of triumphs, a lot of disasters, and it was a mess. But I think that was one of the things that really helped me dive deep into, is getting better at recognizing that I'm triggered, and then learning how to speak. Because when you're in a trigger, you know, either you freeze, right? It's fear. You freeze up, or you get mad and start attacking, or the fight, flight, whatever. And so I got better at, actually speaking when I feel fearful. And then I was able to tell people what's going on. And then they didn't feel like they were in this cartoon and they have no idea what's going on, right? And so, and anytime I had a bigger emotion in it, then I really noticed, okay, that is mine. That has nothing to do with that other person. They're just there to help me see what I'm doing. And so just turn it around, and even though the bigger monsters come, I just keep on going at it. I guess I just want to see what's on the other side of it. I think that, as you go deeper, you just get to know yourself better, and you get to know who you are, and you go deeper into that. And yeah, sometimes you feel like kind of a creep, and you feel kind of bad about it. But is this, this is VR where we learn to grow? Well, it's okay. It's okay if you're a creep. Sometimes everybody's a creep at some points, And so I just wanted to share that. I think there's some things Tom could say about that.
Yeah, well, the thing that, of course, it shines out, Cheryl, is that you've been successful. You've been very successful. You've come a long, as the advertisement says, you've come a long way, baby. It's been from very dysfunctional to almost functional, and it's getting to the point that it's very functional now, and that's good. But there's one thing that has seen you through all this, one thing that's enabled you to make the trip, one thing that has helped you turn, disaster after disaster into learning, a learning situation where you grew from it. And that one thing is courage. And if I had to add to courage, I'd say resilience. Don't give up, get back in there, don't let it go. Find the lesson. All right, that was terrible. We ended up screaming at each other in 10 minutes. Okay, now, what was that all about? Think about it and go back. Don't just run away from it. Don't say, oh, I'm just a failure and can't learn how to, interact with people. I need to go dig a hole and, crawl in it and live there by myself. That's the only way I'll find peace. That's not true. You have to have the courage to go back and try to do it better next time. Go back again. When that explodes, you try to do it better next time. But every time something explodes, you have to ask the question, why? Why did that explode? What was my part in that? What did I do to help that explosion take place? You see, and then you learn from it. So yeah, that's the process in beating fear. You've beaten a lot of fears. You've changed tremendously. And it's because you had the courage to just find the lesson in whatever experience you had, good, bad, or ugly, and then go back in, try it again. Change something. Say, well, I'm going to try to not let that happen again like it did the last time. I'll try to be different because I'm the only one I can change. It's not about them being different. It's about me being different so that I can interact with lots of people and do it in a positive way, even if those people are grumpy. I want to be able to interact with them in a nice way. So that's what has helped you succeed. You have the courage to grow and the stamina to keep working on it. And the two of those have produced rather remarkable process. You are a very different person than you were. When did this thing start? 3 or 4 years ago?
No, it's been more like 6 now.
6 years?
Six
Yeah.
going on 7, yeah.
Yeah, so 6 or 7 years ago, just imagine, just what your life was like, what your relationships were like, and what your connections with people were like, and what you were like. And yes, you can just think back and you say, wow, I've come a long way, a long, long way. Whereas when you're going forward, every little gain seems tiny. It's like, all right, I got this tiny little piece figured out. Now let me just work on that till I get that under my belt. Then I'll go at another tiny little piece, and you see all these little tiny pieces, and you wonder if you're ever going to get there. But when you look back, you can see, wow, big changes, all the difference in the world, growing up, learning, becoming a better person with lower entropy, more love to give, more love to pass around. And it does work, but it isn't easy, is it, Cheryl? It's a tough row, but it's also a very rewarding row to hoe. You get a lot of rewards when things begin to work.
You get less disasters. and
Yeah.
and you can also as I move forward, I could see how you can just say one sentence that could help somebody's whole day, because they're having a bad day. Instead of going, whoa, what's your problem, then I look at it, it's like, oh, they're trying. And thank you for all those kind words, Tom. You're very kind, and of course I love you to pieces, more than rocks and frogs. And I just want you to know that I appreciate all your help and guidance this last 6 years, because you really helped me a lot. Because I really was a mess. I'm not fixed yet, but I'm so much better than I was, and I can see it in my world. And I just wanted to tell you I appreciate it, and encourage everyone. It really, sometimes when you level up to the next level of monsters and they start all coming out, and you think, oh, I'm tired and I just want this to go away. Just push through it, because each little bit break, you get a break, but then you'll get onto these bigger breaks to where you can start seeing, oh, they're just having a bad day. This has nothing to do with me. So what can I do? I can't fix it, but I can be nice, and above all, be kind, even though they're not. So that's all I had to say to you, and thank you, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's good not to be, so frightened that you can't stand even a single disaster. You have to go from disaster to disaster often before you get to where the disasters start to disappear. Where it takes courage to do that. So way to go, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. And love you better than rocks and frogs. That's saying something big from Texas there, right? Okay. All right. Tom, we've got Guillaume, who has a follow-up to a previous question you had, and Anna has a short question for you following that. She's brand new to the group. Go ahead, Guillaume.
For the follow-up, I was referring to the fear-based nemesis questions by TOs lately, but I guess my question is really in relation with the Cheryl question. My simple question is, how can we get rid of shame? By shame, I mean that very primal feeling we all learn as a children in relation with simple and more complex traumas. By shame, I mean the fear that people will find us out as fakes, the fear of foolishness and fear of mistakes, all those fears that tap into shame, and maybe what a lot of people means when they talk about their imposter syndromes. The Buddhists speak of the 5 fears that stand between ourselves and our freedom. I believe I'm talking about more specifically the fear of loss of reputation and fear of speaking before an assembly. I'm a musician, and the fear of foolishness is so present in my work, and I can divide it in 2 parts: fear of being thought a fool, the loss of reputation, and fear of being a fool, the fear of unusual states of mind. It may seem some silly fear for other people, but I think those fears are more part of me than serious fear like fear of loss of life. So Tom, how can I get rid of that shame? Do that neurosis in me is going to be there forever and I just have to live with it? you often relate to shame for talking. You often relate to the feeling of inadequacy when you're talking about shame. So I'm curious, and here's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, shame and inadequacy are very similar. You know, when you feel inadequate, you're not good enough. And typically when you feel shame, you're not good enough. You know, that's kind of both fall in a similar category. Shame is where the negativity is all about yourself. I failed. I'm not good enough. I'm not serious. And it more than just feeling bad about yourself. It's worrying about what other people think about you. You care very much about other people's opinions. Is, you know, what do they think about me? Do they think I'm foolish? Do they think I'm silly? Do they think I'm not a good musician? Do they think I'm this or that? Uh, your opinion of yourself is derived from the opinion of others about you. If other people, you know, seem to value you and think you're great, well, then you feel better. And if other people, you know, think you're not so great, then you feel worse. So you're getting your opinion of yourself not from yourself or how you feel, but how others feel about you. Now, that is probably an artifact of your childhood. You probably were put in situations where you felt shame as a child. And children have a tendency, unlike adults, to blame themselves for everything, because parents are near godlike, so parents can't be wrong. So when something's really wrong, the children think they're wrong. It's their problem because, you know, God isn't mistaken. You know, the parents aren't mistaken. They're always right. So you have parents who are unnecessarily rough with you, or in the way they treat you, and in the way they share their love with you, or they don't share their love with you. You tend to take that out as a failure of your own, rather than as the fact that you had parents that had a real difficult time, say, sharing love or being emotional. So there's lots of people, Golemy, that fall in the same basket that you do, and mostly it comes from very young aged traumas of getting these fears of being inadequate when they were very small. That's typically where the roots are, where it comes from. And then because you have no real positive things you believe about yourself, you try to gain, well, how am I, by listening to what other people think of you. And then it's all about, you know, other people and what they think. And of course, other people are about as fickle as they can be. There's all kinds of other people out there. There's caring people, but there's a lot of not so nice people out there as well. And when you depend on other people, well, that's a grab bag. Sometimes nice, sometimes ugly. You know, there's lots of unpleasant other people out there. So when you depend on others, usually it's not a pretty picture. You'll always find other people who will give you a negative because it makes them feel more positive. By giving you a negative, they feel negative about themselves as well. But if they can dump negative on you, well, then they feel better. So anyway, it's the same as the rest of the fears. No, you don't have to just live with it all your life. You have to see it, which you do clearly. You have to see that it is affecting your life negatively, which you do see that it is. And then you have to have this attitude. It is, you know, dysfunctional. I don't want to be that way. And it will be scary if you just go off and do something because that's what you want to do without even thinking about how will other people receive it. Will they applaud or boo? You know, what will they think? Well, you might then only play 15 minutes of it. Even though you're playing, say, for 2 hours, you'd only play 15 minutes of what you'd like to play. And then you just see how it goes. But have the courage to try that. It's the courage, you know, it's the same thing that Cheryl was talking about. You know, Cheryl had disaster after disaster with her family. All her family, they were all pretty self-centered and they all fought with each other most of the time, you know, and it was an easy place to fail. No matter what you did, there was almost a guaranteed failure. You know? So she knew it was going to be a lot of disasters, but you let the disaster happen and say, well, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do something else. And well, what happened was a disaster. And then you say, well, why was that disaster? And what was my part in that disaster? Find your part in it and fix it. Then go try again. Oh, another disaster. What was my part in that? And eventually you learn. So it takes the courage to say, well, disasters, you know, if it's a disaster, that's okay. I'll learn something from it. If it's not a disaster, oh, well, that's great too. So in that case, when you think that way, then there are no disasters. There's only learning situations. That's all. There's just learning and growing situations. There are no disasters. And what this person thinks you of, that person thinks of you, that's all about them. It's not about you. They think a certain way about you, not because of the way you are, but because of the way they are. Doesn't tell you anything about you. So whether they love you or don't love you, or like what you do or don't like what you do, doesn't say really anything about you. It says about them and their tastes and their wants and their needs and their fears. So realize that you shouldn't spend much time judging yourself. You judge yourself all the time. You judge yourself so much to the point that it kind of gets wadded up into a ball. It's got nowhere to go. You just have to wait and decompress from it. Judging yourself like that is not helpful. You won't find answers there. Where you find answers is just being the best person you can be, making the low entropy choices, doing what you think is right, and just seeing how that plays in the world, seeing how that works, and then having the courage to do it again and see how that works. And if some people don't like it, well, some people probably do like it. And then you play it for the people who do like it. Let the people who don't like it go someplace else. Build your confidence and your courage that you can grow beyond the circle of shame and fear that you find yourself in. It's a dead end. You have to break out of it, and it'll take courage to do it. You'll have to do things that just scare you to death. Just terrifying. Well, pull up your courage and do it anyway, and let's see what happens. Then get back and do it again. One way to do that is you can look at things and say, well, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, well, the worst that could happen is I do something and I get a lot of negative response from it. Okay, that's the worst thing. Well, that's not actually going to hurt you that much. Then you look and you say, well, why was it negative? What is it that they didn't like about that? What part of that did I cause? Had I done something different where they liked it better? How could I have done it differently so that they like it better? And then go do it again and see. But just have the courage to go out on that limb of risk and risk it all just to show the world what you're like, what's inside of you, and let the risk be there. And then the courage to do it again and then do it again and learn from it each time. Adjust what you do and how you do it. Adjust how you interact with your audience. Adjust how you interact with your own skills and tools. And eventually you'll find yourself out of it. Fears will be gone. Your life will be different. You will have confidence where now you have none. So you have to get your intention on, I need to fix this thing. I don't need to be this way. Do it, have the courage to just be laughed at. That's okay. You'll learn something. Be applauded. It's okay. You'll learn something. Don't take any of it personally. All the laughing and all the applause, that's about other people. That's what they like and what they don't like. It's not about you. That's about them. And you can learn to be ways that please them and be ways that please yourself, and the difference between those and the value between those. But this is all kind of more advanced stuff. But in the beginning, just pick one thing and go out on a limb with it. Let failure be an option. Say, okay, if it fails, that's all right. I'm okay with it. I'll deal with it and I'll come back and do it again, even if it fails. So that's the kind of toughness you have. Now, if you want to go back and try to find the very beginnings of it, you'll probably find it as a young child, being told that, not even being told, but you got the idea. You interpreted, things that you weren't worthwhile. You were unworthy. You were shameful. You get that idea. Now, your parents may have never said anything like that. They may have never intended anything like that, but that's how you interpreted the situation. Because you were only 3 or 4 or 5 years old, your interpretation was kind of very, very young and not necessarily accurate. Or you may have had just horrible parents that just told you that kind of stuff and meant it, That happens too. Parents also suffer from the same sorts of things, and they have a tendency to pass what they suffer from onto their children. But then the buck ends here. You can be the one that fixes that. So you don't pass it on to anybody. So it's just that resolve to have the courage to try, to reach out there and accept the failure, accept the shame, accept whatever comes your way, and just see what happens. Give it your best shot. Learn from it. Do it again. Learn from it. Do it again. Don't be afraid of disaster after disaster, as Cheryl says. You may have to go through a bunch of disasters, but each time you'll learn something, and the disasters will get fewer and fewer and fewer, and the successes more and more as you go. But if you're too afraid to start, then that's a hard problem. So courage is the key. And resolve. So that's a little tough love there, Ptolemy. And I know it's a hard thing to tell somebody. It is a tough love, but you can do it. You've got all sorts of quality. I can see you from the inside, not just from the outside. And you got a lot of quality there, a lot to give, a lot of capacity. There's a lot of value, but you have a hard time letting it out because you're afraid that it won't be accepted. So I think you'll find, I can guarantee you that if you do let it out, you'll be surprised how accepted that you'll be. Hope
Thanks,
that
Tom.
helps. Yeah.
Looks like we only have time for one more, so we're going to go to Anna for her question. Go ahead, Anna.
Thank you. I'm also interested in treating people and in healing. There is Canadian doctor, Gabor Mate, and he treats patients with ayahuasca. And in Germany, they start also to use psychedelic, plants or something like that. And they report they do connect, and they have also connection to big system and so on. So maybe can you recommend it, or do you know something about it? Whether it's also an opportunity for us to use, ayahuasca, these plants, even to treat our fears and so on, or it's not so good idea. I don't know whether you know some information about it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. I can talk about that a little. Psychedelics are, very powerful drugs, and because of that, they frighten people. And primarily, I think they frighten the establishment because of how they affect people. But in any case, I think that there may be value in these drugs, but it needs to be researched. It needs, I'm glad you're saying that a doctor's doing this, you see. if you do this in a very methodical way and you research it and you know that this is what happens when you do that and that this is valuable for that, and you do your studies and you give it to 500 people and the 500 people have these reactions, and if it's done like that to where it's science, then I suspect there probably will be good value in using psychedelic drugs to help certain kinds of people get over issues, because it gives a person a very different perspective of their issue. Instead of seeing it all from this little narrow, locked in little picture, they can see it in terms of a much bigger picture. So for that, I think there probably is value. But the idea of doing psychedelics, because it will make you a more spiritual person if you go out and get in the jungle and have ayahuasca and throw up and do all the whole ceremony kind of stuff, that I think is a bad idea. There isn't any place that you can get to or see or experience with ayahuasca that you can't get there in a much better, safer, and more meaningful way without it. It's not necessary. So you can get there on your own to all those same places and states. And when you get there on your own, you actually are learning things as you go. The trip itself is extremely useful. Whereas if you take a drug and blam, you're blasted into some space, well, all right, you may have an epiphany. You may suddenly say, oh, I see, everything's connected, and it's all about love, and you get these epiphanies, but it doesn't actually change you. It's an experience. You get an experience. You don't change who you are because you've had an experience. Okay. You change who you are because you have an intention to be different, because you change, the way you react, the way you think, the way you feel. That change doesn't happen to you just because you do something that's a peak experience. You can get on a modern, very unusual roller coasters that flip and go upside down and sideways and backwards, and you can do all that, and it's very exciting and it's thrilling, and it gives you an experience that you can't have any other way. It's the only way you can have that experience is to get on that particular ride. And then when you get off, you want to get right back on again, and you want to do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And after your 20th time, well, now you're kind of done with it. Okay, you've done it 20 times, you've experienced it, you're over with it. But you're the same person you were before. You didn't learn anything. It wasn't a learning experience. So just because an experience is, wow, gee whiz, and it seems like it shakes the earth, doesn't necessarily mean that experience is going to help you grow or change. You have to do that from the inside out. So now in a doctor's hands, in somebody's, and it doesn't have to be a doctor, but somebody who has, who really understands what they're doing and how it affects people and has done the research and knows what they're doing so they can keep people from hurting themselves and so on. Well, in that environment, I suspect there are ways to use drugs like that to help people see bigger pictures, but not just did you see the picture and now you're changed, but do you see this bigger picture and what does that mean to you? How does that, how does that change how you see who you are? And if they can then take that line of inquiry to actually get the person to change who they are, then good. Maybe the drug was a catalyst to help that change come along. But the drug itself isn't going to make the change. But it could be a catalyst. So I'm pleased to see that there are responsible professional people who have taken enough time to learn about it, where these things can be seen. How useful are they? We know marijuana is good for, pain reduction. Cancer patients, we know that seems to work really well. And I suspect these drugs will have useful medical applications if we just get over it and do something with them, scientifically, not just people run off and take them recreationally. Then I think they're more destructive than they are helpful in the long run.
Tom, thank
Okay.
you for answering that question. Anna is a psychologist for Ukrainian refugees in Germany, and that's a very
Yeah.
noble cause. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good work, Anna.
We will have to wrap up the 90-second
Yes.
fireside chat, and we thank you all for attending. It was a spectacular session. I know. Thank you, Adam, for being there. We'll see you
Thank you,
again.
Yeah.
Tom. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for
Thank you,
everyone for
Donna. Thank
coming.
you, Tom. Thank you, Adam.
So
Thanks,
long.
guys. That was
Thank you,
fun.
Tom.
Good one today.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You
Thank you
guys.
all.
Everyone
Bye-bye.
next
Tom,
time.
thank you, Donna. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you,
Later, Tom.
everyone.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, but please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.